the broadcast right now. So now I put spotlight on you, so that no one, so that not the whole audience would be exposed for the live stream, and it's now should be started on YouTube and Facebook.
Okay.
As well. Yeah.
See,
it wasn't supposed to go there before right now. Like.
Got it. Good. Let's see. This way there are questions, I can see it.
Yeah, we will be also monitoring them just in case.
Yeah.
We usually do it. Yeah, usually we don't have that many people watching live, but sometimes we have.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just logging in, see if I see it. Okay. Dr. Sasha, if you see any questions, just forward it to me because I won't watch.
Sure.
And we shall open the chat and begin. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ganatimasha Gyana Chakra Unmilitam Shri Gurave Namaha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Well, in the Gita, we're going to read something quite interesting. I'll give you two versions of the translation. And in text 53, Shruti Vibrita Penate Yuda Stasyati Nischala Samadva Achala Buddhis Tada Yogam Avapayasi. When your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas and remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, then you'll have attained to divine consciousness. And Andrea, I'm going to ask you to read the purport.
Sorry, let me grab my Gita. I'm sorry, what's the verse for today?
It is 253.
Oh, almost had it.
Take your time.
253. Yes. Purport. To say that one is in samadhi is to say that one has fully realized Krishna consciousness. That is, one in full samadhi has realized Brahman, Param Atma, and Bhagavan. The highest perfection of self-realization is to understand that one is eternally the servitor of Krishna, and that one's only business is to discharge one's duties in Krishna consciousness. A Krishna conscious person, or unflinching devotee of the Lord, should not be disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, nor be engaged in fruitive activities for promotion to the heavenly kingdom. In Krishna consciousness, one comes directly into communion with Krishna, and thus all directions from Krishna may be understood in that transcendental state. One is sure to achieve results by such activities and attain conclusive knowledge. One has only to carry out the orders of Krishna or his representative, the spiritual master.
Very good. You read well. Thank you. Well, this is quite interesting here. Flowery language of the Vedas. Don't be disturbed by that. What is a flowery language of the Vedas? Just think about it for a moment. What's the flowery language of any scripture? There's a Sanskrit word or phrase that talks about these kind of things. Think about the term flowery language, which Prabhupada uses. It's a very interesting translation Prabhupada did. I'll read another translation, a very precise translation of this verse by Hridayananda Maharaj. You won't get as much out of this in meaning as you do from Prabhupada's, but you will get a better sense of what the Sanskrit is saying. When your hearing confounded reason, hearing confounded, that's flowery language, reason, stands unwavering, unmoving, in full concentration, then you'll attain yoga. So here it's hearing confounded. Another way, flowery language. The Vedas are full of karma kanda. What is karma kanda? Doing fruitive activities. Now, we want people to be moral, to not jump over the subway stylists and pay their little token. We want people to pick up their literature and their litter, and also to not kill people in the process. A professor of mine was walking down New York, and someone dropped some literature, litter. And he said, please, very kindly, he's a very kindly man, please just put it in the garbage can. We're trying to keep the city clean. And he only needed 20 stitches from the knife he got. Yeah, so he lived. So, in order to get people to behave, and it's necessary for society, the Vedic literature is something called karma kanda, also known as flowery language. You do this, you can get this award. You do this ritual, and you tap your head 10 times here, and you throw salt over your shoulder, and you do all these things, and you can get some benefit. And there's some truth to this. I mean, if you rise early and you say your prayers and you do your rituals, you definitely get some benefit from it. It does take you to goodness. Yet, that very same benefit can become the biggest obstacle. I'll give you an example. This is one Prabhupada used. I liked it a lot. It's so simple. Those of us who have been to India have all gone to a bathing ghat. Bathing ghat means holy river like the Ganges or the Yamuna, or a place like Radhakund or Sevakund. So these holy places where you go in the water, you get your Vedic baptism, you might say. And at festival times, hundreds, thousands of people will converge on some of these spots and go in the water. In prior times, these are known as pious events. Now in India, they're known as super spreaders for COVID. But that's another story. So there was one sadhu at one of these bathing ghats, where they look like a series of steps going down into the water. So he put his shoes on the steps, and the Indian sandals, they all generally look alike. And so he rolled up a little mud ball and he put it in his sandal. So when he finished his ritual bath, he could come out and find which are his shoes. So other people were watching and they said, oh, look, the sadhu put a mud ball in his shoe. We all ought to put a mud ball in the shoe. So when the sadhu got out, every shoe had a mud ball in it. So this is similar to the flowery language of the Vedas. Those things rituals that may be useful, may be important, but the purpose is not understood. Or the purpose is understood, but it's understood in a perverted way. I'll tell a story about that. When I first went to India, I was, before I met the devotees, I was a high school teacher in India, teaching at a rural school. And I went to India trying to understand, what's this Gita about? I'd read the Gita, but I wanted to understand, what's it really about? And I said, I need to go to the place where it began to understand that. And so I would go to temples, Hindu temples, and Muslim mosques, and Christian churches, and even Adivasi tribal rituals, and then Kali temples and Shiva temples. And when I would go, I knew enough Hindi to converse. And I would say to the people I meet, I was a Hindi speaking part of India, I'd say, why are you here? Now, any of you who grew up in the West, or from India, let's say, and you were between the ages of 10 and 15, went to a church, a synagogue, a temple, can you just raise your hand and let me know? I can see you on the screen. If you went when you were when you were young. Okay, I see Dixon and Naveda, Andrea, Aravind. Aravind, why did you go? You can unmute and tell me, why did you go?
I might have misunderstood your question. You were asking.
Why did you go to the temple when you were young?
Oh, to a temple.
Yes.
Well, when I was young, I probably just followed my parents.
Okay. And then when you got older, did you still go?
Yeah.
Why? Why?
I guess faith, and when I was younger, I was probably asking for a lot of stuff too. So I went to God when I needed something,
I needed something. Interesting. Very interesting. Who else would like to share with me why they went? Anybody else who raised their hand? Gaurav? Am I saying that right?
Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why did you go? Tell me something about
I also went. I think initially my parents used to take me, but then also where I lived, there were beautiful.
We lost you for a moment. Yeah. We lost you. You weren't praying hard enough when you went as a youth, and now look what happened. Okay, we lost him for a moment. He'll come back. Atma, why did you go?
Before I go, I just have to say, it looks like Gaurav is just being very pensive for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
I was once at a Bhagavatam class. I won't mention the name, but given by a senior devotee. And he spoke in a monotone. So most people were sleeping and then at one point he went like this, and Krishna is a supreme person. And then he paused, and it was the longest pause. And I was thinking, boy, what's going to come out is going to be amazing. But it was a snore. He was giving the class and fell asleep. Okay, that really happened. I wasn't the only one who saw that. But anyway, but we'll let that person remain anonymous.
Okay, well, that was funny. Yeah, so my experience, I don't really remember the ins and outs, but this is before I was a teenager. I went to either churches and or synagogues a couple of times, and couple, I mean 2 or 3, because I was maybe sleeping over at a friend's house or something, and the family did that. And the other time I went to church when I was maybe 4th grade or something. I can't remember the year, but I was drawing in Northwest Connecticut, where they have some of the most oldest, most beautiful churches.
Very beautiful.
Yeah, and my family has a place there, so we were there. And and I was doing I can't remember if it's a drawing or a creating a three-dimensional, I think it was a drawing with all the architecture and all this stuff. And then I took all these photos, and it was a big project. Anyway, there was nothing religious whatsoever. So my answer to your question is probably totally unhelpful.
But interesting, you went out of invite. Andrea, you had your hand raised. Why did you go?
Well, I was raised Catholic, and I went every week because my mom took us, and she felt that it was important. And during that period of time, it's funny that you picked it. During that period of time, I actually got really fervent, and I wanted to be like the best Catholic. And I was really into the Virgin Mary, and I just, had my own little like fervor. Like I thought maybe I could become a nun or something. So it's interesting you picked that period of time, because before that it was just because my mom took us. But then during that period of time, I had like that different sense of it.
Well, that period of time is a time when people start awakening and making their own decisions. But what did you hope to get out of it going?
I loved the community sense of it. Like I loved when we all sang together in church, and I was part of a girls group that was dedicated to the Virgin Mary, so I felt community through that, and it was just a sense of comfort. For the most part, being at church was tranquil and peaceful compared to regular life.
Okay. Who else went to a church?
I did, Prabhu. I also did go to church in my teen days, and it was more of like a social gathering.
Social gathering.
Yeah,
okay.
It was like on Sundays we didn't have much to do. Saturdays and Sundays, Saturdays you go to extra classes, and Sundays you go to church. So it was a routine where like you just go and socialize with your friends and stuff like that.
Now, here's the interesting part. A few of you said you went to get something. Others went for social life. Hardly anybody goes because Andrea Little was thinking of becoming a nun, but thinking there's a saying done by a very famous American. He was president in 1960. Very, very famous, very intelligent. That's John Kennedy. And he said in his inaugural speech words that have now often been repeated. But it had a good theme to it. He said, "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." And those words made him one of the most popular presidents ever. It was brilliant. And it follows a devotional theme. Ask not what God can do for you, ask what you can do for God. But most people go to church, what can God do? When I was in India, it was more dramatic than America. I expected deep spirituality, and I expected people to really be meditative. And when I'd go to the churches and temples, there was always for something. They treated the religious institution the same way you and I treat Amazon.com. Now, how do we treat Amazon.com? We click, we give them something, our credit card, and they give us something. And if you live in New York City, it can be the same day, but other places the next day. And if you're in the boondocks, you have to wait 2 whole days, darn it. So you click and it comes. And when I went in India, it so much was like Amazon.com. People wanted something. They went there and they wanted something. In America, it was a little less of that. We still had it. We still had it. The 2 Indians on the call referred to that. But in America, it was more a little of that, but also it was social. It was a place to hang out. It was interesting. It might have been artistic. This is very, very telling. And it relates directly to this verse. Now, why is it that in India, it was much more of a business, and America was much more of a social life? This is an interesting question to me, and it might be to you. Can anybody speculate as to why? And then I'll give you a theory. You don't have to. Yes, Atmaji.
I've thought about this before, and my feeling or my guesswork is that, well, you know how Prabhupada would say that in India, you'd refer to Bharat, they're in Bhartavarsh. This is the land where, you know, they have God. They have complete knowledge of, they're offered complete knowledge of God, and it's sort of in their, deep in their background that's there, and yet they chose to forego most, you know, the majority chose to forego the opportunity to surrender to the Lord, even though they were offered that, you know, the opportunity on a golden platter kind of, and you know, at one point. And so it's sort of, there's sort of a stark contrast between surrendering to the absolute truth and sort of being upfront about the fact that you're using the very same Vedic knowledge to achieve material benefits. And whereas in the West, it's sort of like, you know, they were in the dark and they continue to be in the dark. And so it's not so obvious that they're running away from God. There's so, you know, there's so much of a gray cloud about spirituality that you know, it's unclear that they're taking spiritual knowledge and using it for the opposite purpose. It's more like, hey, let's just hang out, and they're almost ignoring that they're in a spiritual place. They're not even going to the church necessarily to get something from God or to surrender to God. It's let's just go hang out, or, you know, appreciate, you know, something about the environment. So that's sort of my speculation, how I feel about it. But I'm glad we're speaking, you know, just in this circle, because some things that I'm saying there, they could certainly be construed to be very negative about, you know, one religion and favoring another. And I think I kind of said something negative about all of them. So hopefully I won't, what I said won't be construed that way.
Oh, well, I'm going to, don't worry. You won't be in any trouble, because I'm going to go a lot worse. Okay. Now, in India, there is something better and something worse. And that's the point I'm getting to. What's better in India? In India, there is a great opportunity to delve deeply. Prabhupada used to use the example, there's a dictionary, and sometimes a dictionary could be like this, and sometimes it could be like this, so thick. The Oxford Dictionary is 2 very thick volumes, and the abridged dictionary can fit in your pocket. They both tell you the words, but one has so much more detail than the other. So India has the advantage of having a lot of detail, so much more detail than in the West. And India has developed the science of how to manipulate the material energy through religious techniques, by doing sacrifices, by offerings. Every religion has you do something. There's some way to manipulate the material energy. But in India, it's developed to a more advanced science. Therefore, it's much more easy in India to be bewildered by it. So in India, it's much more easy. And I saw the citizens there had the greatest science. They had the Gita. They had the essence. At the same time, they had a better opportunity to manipulate it. And so the temples became, why did people go to temples in India and churches and mosques? I'll tell you why. The order I saw is they wanted money, or sometimes more specifically, a good dowry, rain. They wanted something material. And the flowery language of the Vedas, known as karma kanda, gives that opportunity to get material facility. It's a science. It's much more advanced than in the West. And the good news is we have the advanced science. The bad news is it can bewilder us and take us away from the essence. So something good, something bad. Prabhupada used to say about India, he said, India is wonderful. They're only one step from Krishna, facing the wrong direction. And he used to say, in the West, they're 10 steps from Krishna, facing the right direction. Now, that was in the days when young people, Prabhupada was talking about, were really interested in spiritual life and a great interest. And in India, there was a great interest in getting to the West and material life. Things have changed. Some places in India are richer than America, and things have changed. But at least the time Prabhupada was there, it was like that. I went to India because when I read the Gita, I couldn't get it out of my mind. It wasn't Prabhupada's Gita, it hadn't been out yet. But there were so many yogis coming from India to America. So if I don't go to India, I won't find out who the real ones are. But I went there because I knew there was a great spiritual depth there. I just had to find it. And sometimes we get lucky or whatever. I was. And sometimes we can get bewildered. I had told this story one time, but I'll repeat it again. I can't remember which class. I was in New Delhi, 1971. And you never met anybody in New Delhi I was 22. So I would never meet anybody my age from the West unless they had long hair and hadn't showered in 2 weeks. In other words, a hippie. And that was the standard. You never meet you might say, a clean-cut American. Now, I was clean-cut because I was a teacher and that was absolutely required of me. I wasn't a high-end teacher. I was getting only a few hundred rupees a month, but still, nevertheless, I was a teacher. So before I went to India, the government made me cut my beautiful long hair off. In those days, I had long hair. Now I just long for some hair. But anyway, that's another matter. I met this fellow, and clean-cut American. So what are you doing here? He says, well, I'm looking for a guru. So really, so am I. And I said, how's it going? So we went to lunch together. How's it going? He said, great. I met a guru. He can make ashes appear out of his hand, and he knows the Gita very well, and he's mystical and knows the Gita. I said, wow, and more wow. This is what I want. Little mystical, some Gita philosophy. And I said, by the way, what are you doing in New Delhi? Your guru's far away. And the other end of the country says, oh, I'm going home. I said, you came all the way to India to find your master. You found your master. He's mystical. He's smart. He knows the Gita. Why in the world would you go home? And he said to me, I got tired of him putting his hand in my pants. Whoops. Ooh. I won't mention the name because I don't like doing that of the guru, but he's well known. And after he died a few years ago, the BBC, his very good journalist, did a whole expose. He wasn't the first, the second, the third, or the 100th person who had the same story. So, there was a mood then that we can go to India and find something deeper. But what bewildered it is sometimes cheating, like in this case, the fellow was cheating. Might have had some mystical power, I can't say, but generally cheating. The other thing that covered the spirituality in India was karma kanda, this fruitive language in which people will try to use the Vedas to get something. Again, we have that in the West. It's just in India, everything in India on the spiritual side is more developed. There's more literature. The love of God, the depth is generally more developed. The illusion, those things that take you away, they're also more developed. So you have to really approach a proper teacher to distinguish what is real and what is illusion in India. So this is something about the flowery language. Now, this flowery language, don't think it's just somebody in India or just Arjuna gets bewildered by it. We all can get bewildered by the flowery language of thinking, I'm going to use this knowledge to gain something from my senses. And any one of us that says, I've never had that thought, has not examined their thoughts very well. But we all can get a little taste of that. The secret is to be aware, ooh, that's not a thought I want to have. If we're not aware of our thoughts, then the thoughts will eat us alive and can take us away. So Krishna here is trying to make Arjuna aware of the illusion he puts up with this flowery language. Now, in the next verse, it was interesting. Arjuna then asks a really smart question. He asks a lot of smart questions. He says, okay, Krishna, let's pretend my mind was no longer disturbed by the flowery language. Or let's say I don't want my mind to be disturbed. What are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is merged in transcendence? How does he speak? What's his language? How does he sit? How does he walk? How do I recognize someone? Prabhupada says, interesting, he said, a fool may be dressed in a fancy suit, a tuxedo. You don't know the person's a fool until they open their mouth and talk. So talk is a symptom. So Arjuna asks, how does someone like that talk? What is his language? And even how does he sit? How does he walk? How would I recognize the symptom of someone who's Krishna conscious? I told the story in India because this person I met thought he had met someone who had attained the highest consciousness. He spoke well. He walked. I've seen videos. He walked with a real presence about him. So how do we know if he was really Krishna conscious or not? Well, we have to see by the next verse. And Krishna says, when a man or woman gives up all varieties of sense gratification, sense desire, which arrive from the mental concoction. The mental concoction is that I am this body. And when his mind finds satisfaction in the self, then he is said to be in transcendental consciousness. And a few verses later, Krishna says that person is like a tortoise. They can withdraw their senses like a tortoise withdraws into a shell. And in other words, they still may have the same desires as anyone else, but when the desires take them away from the transcendental path, they know the art of withdrawing their senses. These are the symptoms. That the fellow I met in New Delhi, his guru, when the opportunity came, his guru extended his senses instead of withdrawing them. So that symptom is that somebody who is not bona fide. Then it gets very interesting. Krishna gives some more symptoms. He says one who is really without attachment this is a tough one for me, I'll confess. He says two things. He doesn't rejoice when he obtains something good, and doesn't lament when he obtains evil or loses something. Now, when I lose my keys, I lament like everything, like anything. And when I find them, I rejoice. But a real super Krishna conscious person isn't disturbed except by the greatest sin. The greatest sin will disturb even a very Krishna conscious person. The greatest sin is to prevent others from becoming Krishna conscious. So Prabhupada rarely got angry, but he would get angry when someone would do something that would prevent others from becoming Krishna conscious. People would attack devotees, certain circumstances. And even though his anger, or he'd get angry when a disciple was falling down and did not and was becoming offensive. Why would Prabhupada get angry? Because by getting angry, he'll prevent that disciple from committing more offenses and getting further from Krishna. But his anger, I noticed, was never like yours and mine, at least mine, because he'd be angry one moment because it was necessary, and a moment later, it's as if the anger never happened. Now, how many of you get angry at something unfair? It's not right. That damn driver in front of me, they're moving along at 10 miles an hour under the speed limit, and I'm late. I'm late to give a class. I'm late for something important, and they're moving 10 miles an hour below the speed limit. And we'll sit there fuming for 20 minutes behind them. What we didn't know is that person's wife just died, and they're on the way to the funeral home. Prabhupada wasn't like that. He didn't get angry by these things. He just tolerated. He knew how to tolerate. So these are the symptoms of one who is very advanced. These are the symptoms. They know how to tolerate. And that's our opportunity to tolerate. And at the same time, not be bewildered by karma kanda or using religion to get greater sense gratification. Religion can give it to you. You can get, I don't just mean that there was one televangelist who had a jet, private jet. It was like a $10 million jet. And he did a campaign. He said, I need a $60 million jet so I could preach more. And he did a big campaign trying to get $60 million for a jet. And like every one of these big time televangelists who almost everyone, eventually you find they're cheating, they have a sexual affair, they're stealing money, something nasty is going on. Because they're trying to use religion as a business. Religion should never be a business. It's about self-realization. So with that, I'll stop here and see if you have any questions on the flowery language of the Vedas. Any questions or comments, or did I insult anybody not enough and they want some more? Let me know. I tried to be fair to all religions. We all know that Jesus saves, Moses invests, and Krishna takes everything. Okay, that's my interreligious comment for the day. So any comments or questions? Anything on your mind? Atmanaveda Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Let's Andrea can go.
Andrea,
Sorry, Ma, you can go.
yeah, Andrea, yes, you got the Zoom.
Okay. So I actually had a question from a class that I saw with Urmila Devitasi.
Yeah.
That I wasn't able to ask a question to her because she was in a hurry. So she she gave this example about how she had a friend who spent like 7 years on her PhD, and when the head of the committee had a stroke, she found out that the new one didn't like her dissertation at all, and then she was timed out, so she couldn't even do a new one. So she never got her doctorate after spending 7 years in it. And she was giving this as an example about how, you know, things can happen where no matter whatever our efforts are, you know, if things are arranged in a certain way, you know, it's not going to happen. And then she was talking about like how does one, you know, like not being attached to the fruits of our labor kind of thing. But I my question for that was like, I don't know how someone could deal with not thinking that all those years and the money that they paid to go to school was not a waste. And like I don't know, I couldn't understand, like I understand the higher philosophical thing of not being attached, but I don't know how practically someone could in Krishna consciousness handle that situation. She didn't go into the details of it, and I know you don't know the details of it, but I'm just saying, like, in your experience, like, how would someone deal with it?
Actually, I think I do know the details of that one. So, because I think I've discussed that with Urmila. Now, you've asked a really good question that gets deep, very deep. First point is, do you know the story of Sisyphus from Greek mythology? He was pushing a ball up a hill, and when it got to the top, it would roll back down. He started over again. So that lady doing her PhD, it sure felt like Sisyphus. And that happens. Sometimes there's a karma we have, and we have to go through certain things. Now, when we become a devotee, we still may have our karma. The difference is our karma is based on not so much to punish us, but to teach us. Karma is a pedagogical tool. So when you become a devotee, the lessons that I need to learn may still be there, but it's given out in a very metered dose. So it doesn't take away from the devotional service. It's not the full dose. So this person may or may not have been devotee. I don't recall right now. I think it was even, but it's just an austerity they had to go through. I've had it happen to me where I worked so hard for something and turns out something else happened. And in the end, it always works out for the best. So sometimes it's hard to see long-term how such a suffering is going 7 years and then having a jerk come into place is how it must have felt. And then having to start over. That's generally not how it works in academia. I mean, happens all the time. Some professor dies, somebody else comes, but they honor past precedents. That's the normal way of academia. So here you had someone who didn't honor past precedents. That alone is a violation of the normal standards. Just like if I go to court, the judge is supposed to use past precedents to make their decision, not invent new law. Am I right on that, Atma?
Yes, thank you.
Now, what do you call that? Starsis decide? What's the Greek, the Latin term? I forgot. There's a Latin term for that.
I don't know, but but all we do is cite the statute.
Yeah.
Statute isn't clear on its face. You cite the case from a court higher than the one that you're in.
Exactly.
That says this is how you interpret the statute that applies to the particular circumstances you're in, and say, so now you have to do the same thing.
And this is a lot of the controversy in the Supreme Court. Do they follow past precedents in Roe versus Wade? Do they reconsider it or follow the precedent? What do they do? These are the big controversies they deal with. So in academia, for someone to not follow the precedent is not, sounds like that person had a lot of ego going into it. But the person on the other end can accept it also as mercy. There was a story, I can't tell it real well, I'd have to think about it, but maybe Atman knows it, about this farmer who good things and bad things would happen to. And like a war came, and the farmer broke his leg, and oh, what a horrible thing happened. He broke his leg, he couldn't work. But then a war came and all the men were drafted, but he wasn't drafted. So the broken leg was a good thing. And it goes on like that, a various sequence of events, something good, something bad. So everything that happens, if we're transcendental, we can start seeing the unseen hand of Krishna. One reason I like going to Vrindavan, India, is the unseen hand of Krishna is more visible. It's like there's a book by H.G. Wells called The Invisible Man. I don't know if any of you have read that. So he had some potion and he could become invisible. But if you sprinkle some talcum powder, you'll find his form. So talcum powder would expose him. So Krishna is like that. Krishna is the unseen hand of Krishna, is always there. Being Krishna conscious means seeing the unseen hand of Krishna. And one reason we go to Vrindavan to recharge our spiritual batteries is when you go to Vrindavan, it's like you have some talcum powder with you. The unseen hand of Krishna is a little bit more visible. You just see it more. At least that's my experience. If you really go to Vrindavan. Now, in order to go to Vrindavan, you cannot just take a plane and then take a hellish taxi ride on the Yamuna Expressway and then go to Vrindavan. You actually have to do work to go to Vrindavan. You have to pray, you have to read, you have to meditate, you have to elevate your consciousness. And if one does, they can actually enter Vrindavan. When I was there a few years ago, Vrindavan, I was amazed how many tourist buses were coming to Vrindavan. So many coming that on the weekends, the city puts a block in the road, and they built a giant parking garage near the ISKCON temple, which is way on the outskirts of town. And when the ISKCON temple was built, there was nothing there, just fields. Now it's all overdeveloped. And they put a giant modern parking garage so the cars and buses can park there, and then it doesn't congest downtown Vrindavan. So these tourists come, they get off the bus, they take pictures of sadhus, take pictures of pigs, take pictures of monkeys, take selfies like anything, take pictures of the most important person they can find in Vrindavan, which is themselves. And when they're done with all their selfies and monkey pictures and everything else, then what do they do next? They get on a bus and go back to Vrindavan. Now, I challenge you, did they really go to Vrindavan? Did they really go? Did they see the unseen hand of Krishna? Did they get that experience? I contend just barely. I mean, it's nice to go to Vrindavan, so maybe something good, but they really didn't enter Vrindavan. To enter, there has to be a certain piety. And you have to, when I go to Vrindavan, I work so hard and I barely get my toe in there. And I work so hard. Atma?
I was just going to say, Prabhu, you said maybe it's good, but and I was just gonna take your butt and try to elaborate at least what's going on based on what's going on in my mind, which is maybe not it's good because and entering into an area where the very best is offered, and then you're sort of going in there with the mindset that you should take it cheaply and not necessarily even know any better that you shouldn't take it cheaply, just taking it as it's like a carnival, something interesting to look at. So it's good if you can hear some people chanting the holy name. That's absolutely good, and scripture says so. But on the other hand, there's this thing where you go in there and you're not going in there with an open mind. Instead, you're going there with a preconception of what you're going to get out of it, and it makes it difficult if you have a preconceived notion when you enter into a sadhu sangha, basically, then to actually hear the transcendental sound vibrations that are being generously offered by the sadhus to those to get their association. And then the problem with that, of course, is what's the expression, like been there, done that, right? So then when there's an opportunity, let's say a year later or whenever, or you come across someone new and they're like, hey, here's this Bhagavad-gita, or hey, here's this temple we could go to, or here's this program we could attend. They're like, no, I've done that. So they already know all about it. So then it prevents them from maybe being really interested. So there's the pros and cons, I suppose.
Well put. There's always a pro. If you even go for the wrong reason, there's some benefit. You're hearing the name, you're seeing the deities, but it's very minimal. I consider it like the moon. The question comes up sometimes among devotees, did we go to the moon? Now, I'm the director of the Bhaktivedanta Institute. Believe me, I get asked this question a lot, and Prabhupada made comments on it. Would you like to know if we went to the moon or not? Anybody would like to know the answer? Well, the answer is like the Vrindavan answer. Prabhupada said two different things. One, he said, we didn't go, it's a heavenly planet. Then later he said, but if they did go and all they brought back was a box of rocks for billions of dollars, they wasted a lot of money. And then he said, if you're wearing a $30,000 spacesuit, I think that's what they cost in the 60s, then did you really go there if you're just wearing a spacesuit? Did you really enter the atmosphere of it? You brought your own atmosphere with you. In other words, every place has its own bodies. I'll give you an example. I'm a geologist. So if you go to some of the deepest places in the ocean, where the pressure is so enormous that if you would go there, you'd flatten out into a pancake in a moment. And in these deep places of the ocean, there are volcanoes. And these volcanoes are spewing lava. So you have super cold water, because the water at the bottom of the ocean is 4 degrees centigrade, under enormous pressure, mixing with boiling lava. And water boils at a much higher temperature under pressure than it does. Like if you go up into the mountains, water boils at a much lower temperature. It takes longer to cook your dinner up high in the mountains at 10,000 feet. So it's the opposite at the bottom of the ocean. So you have one of the most inhospitable places on earth. You have molten lava, frigid water, and super boiling water, all inches apart and just as inhospitable as can be, no oxygen, no food. Yet there's life there. so life is found in every place we go, but the bodies may not, are bodies suitable for that particular location. So if we go to the sun, we'd expect a body to be made of fire. Therefore, we wouldn't have the ability to see it. You can't even look at the sun, let alone go there. Now, of course, there was some idea to send a rocket to the sun at night so it wouldn't burn up, but that was a bad joke. Anyway, at the same time, there's the moon. Every farmer knows you plant according to the moon. And any farmer knows if you don't plant according to the moon, you don't get the same quality of crops. Now, has anybody ever heard of the term lunatic? Where does it come from? I worked in a hospital. And when I worked in a hospital, when it was a full moon night, we always put extra staff on because people went bonkers. And people in the hospital couldn't see the moon. They couldn't actually see from where they were in most cases. But that's why you call them lunatics. People go a little loony on a full moon night. We know that. It's not just that the vampires from Transylvania come. It's something that we all experience. If any of us have farmed, we understand the nature of it. So the moon has something special to it. But to see that, you need the right eyes to see it. And we don't necessarily have the right eyes to see it. Just like you take your eyes. The electromagnetic spectrum goes from very tiny wavelengths, to microwaves, to ultra long waves. A little tiny piece of the electromagnetic spectrum is a visible light. Now, some animals can see ultraviolet light and infrared, things that we can't see, or we can only see with instruments. So similarly, there's our eyes have limited ability to see, especially bodies that are not made of the same ingredients that we're used to. So did we go to the moon? Well, we sent a rocket there. Sariputta, the late brilliant scientist, and I spent many hours discussing it. Yeah, we sent a rocket there, but could people actually enter the atmosphere of the moon and see the celestial side of the moon? The answer is no. Just like the visitors to Vrindavan, they cannot, unless they do the pious activities it takes to really enter Vrindavan, they can't really see Vrindavan, and they don't. Similarly, unless the astronauts are qualified spiritually to see the moon, they may go to a distant place, but they won't see the same thing that a qualified person would see. So, and that explains why Prabhupada gave both answers. He said, just like, let's say I would fly into New Delhi right now. Or better yet, a better example is I fly from Delhi to JFK Airport. And when I get there, I don't have my COVID test results and I don't have my vaccine card. What's America going to do? They're going to put me on a plane right back to India. So the only place I've been to is the arrivals hall at Kennedy Airport. And then they turned me around and sent me right back. Did I or did I not go to America? I sort of went, but I never entered America. I got stuck in the transit lounge because I didn't have the right paperwork. Now, I've had that with friends who have flown to India. When I got to India, they didn't have the right visa. Somehow the airline let them on by mistake. They didn't look carefully. Then when they get to India, they say, I'm sorry, you don't have the right visa. And what do? They put them on a plane, and the airline has to give them the free flight, and they send them back home. Did that person really go to India or not? Well, you might say, yes, they went to India, but they never entered India. They never entered the atmosphere of India. They were stuck in the transit lounge. So similarly, if we did go to the moon, we never entered the moon. So that's an explanation. And if you want to enter Vrindavan, don't think you can just fly there and go. You actually have to spiritually qualify to really see it. Sure, you can go to Vrindavan, but I don't want to go to Vrindavan and just see, the open sewers and pigs and monkeys. I want to see the unseen hand of Krishna, just like the invisible man with the powder sprinkled on it. It becomes visible. So that's my long-winded answer to these questions. Quite long-winded, I might add. Okay, are there any other questions or comments, or is there anything else on your mind? I hope, Andrea, I answered your question without beating around the bush too much. These things, sometimes it's easy to go digress down this and that side path and maybe miss the essence. So do any of you have any other questions on the topic of the night? And if not, on a question that's not a topic of the night? Okay, Atmaji.
Okay, so my question may be dealing with, it's sort of it was something that you talked about this evening, but it wasn't necessarily the theme. It kind of was, but it's sort of, my question is about a subtle point. So
okay,
perhaps it's not the best form for this, but
go for it.
Something's telling me to go for it, and you just told me to go for it. So, so you said, you made the point, and I think Prabhupada has said this, that we shouldn't make a business out of spiritual life. And I think, I can't remember what the quote is, but something like, what is it about, like, in a holy place, it shouldn't be something used for business? What, do you have something more precise you can?
Sure. Prabhupada said to me, the issue came up, and when I was with Prabhupada, somebody asked him, what about somebody who's doing business with the temple without devotion? And Prabhupada said, that's business. That's just business. You don't get that benefit. Now, of course, they might hear the holy name and get some accidental something, but that is not devotion. Devotion means it has a lot to do with our heart. Okay. Like, for example, when we offer obeisances, those of us been around, I once went to get evaluated at a gym. And so what was my physical shape? So they put you through push-ups and sit-ups and trying to see where I stood, and stretches and everything. And most things I wasn't doing very well. But they said on one score, I did better than anyone they've ever seen, even half my age. And that one score was, well, you sit in a machine and you have to see how far you can lean forward, pushing some kind of handle. And he said, wow, that's great. Well, after 50 years of offering obeisances, I'm pretty limber there. So there's some side benefits. I was pretty limber. So when we offer obeisances, Satchidananda Swami last week in his talk put it so brilliantly. He said, when we offer obeisances, our heart is above our head. And so our head is going to certainly, jnana, knowledge, takes us closer to Krishna. But getting closer means we're giving our heart to Krishna. And if it's just in our head, then we're stuck at the flowery language, even a flowery language of bhakti. And if we're not giving our heart to Krishna, then we're not really getting there. And when every time we offer obeisances, we can think, I'm offering my intelligence to Krishna, putting my head to my floor, but above that, Krishna, take my heart. So if we're not putting our heart into it, that's just business.
So Prabhu, that's very interesting. Now, I have another question that was sort of that you were just helping me think through what I wanted to ask.
Okay,
Now
go for it.
And now
You always have good questions, so I like it a lot.
Hare Krishna. So my question is well, I bet you've thought about this a fair amount. So because you're in Gainesville, right? So you're sort of, Gainesville is an extension of Alachua, and Alachua.
No, Alachua is an extension of Gainesville, but
Okay.
go on.
Fine. So Alachua, that may be so, but Alachua is it not the largest community of devotees in a concentrated geographical area in the United States, perhaps the most?
When I came here, there were 8 of us in Alachua.
You were one of the pioneers. Yeah.
Well, we came up with a plan that we thought it would grow, and the plan was too good. Several of us sat down and made a plan, and it proves that man proposes, but boy, does God dispose.
Uh-huh.
Yes, but go on.
Okay, so I suppose that because that one of the part of the plan for when there's a large devotee community, of course it's to get each other's association, but part of it also is, I think, let's do some business together. Better to do business with devotees than non-devotees, and when you're associating with people you're doing business with, do you want it to be more likely that you'll remember Krishna or not? Of course, you're doing business, so the focus is on business, but it's kind of nice if you're doing business with devotees. So, but then the question is, I suppose, so that's the good side of, let's do business with devotees, but then maybe there's some gray area where then it becomes like, let's turn something spiritual into a business, which could be a bad side. And I bet sometimes that issue can be run into when devotees want to do business with each other, which is a good thing. But I could see how it could turn bad. And I can also say personally for myself, and perhaps for unrelated reasons, I prefer not to do business with devotees because if I find that I don't like the way that they're doing their business, I don't want to offend them. So I'd rather just do business with the non-devotees, and I can speak my mind, and I can be tough or diplomatic or reject or accept whatever. I don't have to worry about, offenses or whatever. But that may be unrelated to the issue. So sorry for that tangent.
No, that's a very good point. Many people say the same thing you say. And Chanakya Pandit has a wise saying. He said, when business comes between friends, give up the business, not the friends. So it's one of the wise sayings. Some of the sayings of Chanakya Pandit, I think, are wise guy sayings, but that's a wise saying. So I don't, Chanakya Pandit's, anyway, it's a whole other topic, but interesting topic. But it's very easy to mix up spiritual life and business. So I consider my relationship with devotees very valuable. So certain things I don't do with devotees. I try to avoid certain business things like borrowing money and things, because things can go wrong and I don't want to upset spiritual relationships. So the wisdom you have of not to do that's important. At the same time, in Alachua is 1,000 devotees, and there are many devotee businesses. And sometimes for me, like I'm remodeling the Bhaktivedanta Institute's new house now. So I have a whole devotee team there, and we may have to pay them something, but they're doing it also with their heart and putting in way longer hours and trying to make the best they can. So it's a delicate thing. I don't believe that we never do business with devotees. I also don't believe we always do business with devotees. I try to, and I have friends certainly who are not devotees. Every Saturday morning, the mayor asked me to organize a group, and I'm doing it for, I don't know, 7-8 months now. Half a dozen of us get together with the mayor and we have breakfast together and discuss what can we do to make a better city. And certainly I'm bringing the perspective of a devotee. I don't wear it on my chest. I mean, they all know what I eat and they know that I come, what my basis is. And it's a very difficult thing I'm doing, for me, at least, because I'm trying to take the philosophy and give it a truly practical application in a secular setting. It's very easy to give an application in a non-secular setting, but then to do it in a secular setting. Yesterday, I had lunch with a very interesting fellow. He and I serve on a commission together for Police Review Board. And so I said, let's go have lunch. And he's a professor of philosophy at the university. I said, let's get to know each other a little bit. We have to serve together. And his office is the closest office to Krishna lunch on campus. Turns out he eats there most days of the week. So, of course, we met for Krishna lunch. And he didn't know until we met that I had something to do with it, a lot to do with it, but he didn't know that. And so then we're discussing, very interesting for me, because we're trying to see how do we deal with the complex issues of policing. You know, you have George Floyd, you have Blue Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, you have all these complex issues. So he's dealing with it as an ethicist. He's a professor of ethics. And what's the ethical thing to do? I'm dealing with it, trying to see what are the lessons from the Gita and the Bhagavatam of how to deal with these situations. So we're comparing notes. I find it fascinating because we're enlightening each other. So these are the kind of relationships that are very important. If we only hang out with devotees, which sometimes we live a cloistered life, and that can be healthy. Like Andrea was thinking of becoming a nun. And when somebody goes at one point, when you're young, you're thinking it, a very admirable thing. And nuns sometimes live very cloistered life. And but it's a life of great devotion and love. And I admire it. I've been to monasteries, and there's something so attractive about it. But harder than living in a monastery sometimes is living in the world and still keeping the same values as a monastery. It's very difficult. So as devotees, sometimes we cloister ourselves to protect us from the world. At the same time, that can stifle us. Just like I've used this example in this class before, but I think maybe it's worth repeating. If you're in New York City and you walk down the street, the city is very good about planting trees. When they plant a tree, they put a wire mesh around the tree. If you don't have that wire mesh around the tree, the dogs and people and bicyclists and everyone else will kill the tree. That's for sure. That wire mesh saves the tree so it can grow. Once that tree reaches a certain thickness and height, that same wire mesh will choke the tree and kill it. So the question is, when do some of us may wear a wire mesh our whole life, and that's our fate, and that's what we need. I have no criticism whatsoever. But the question is, when do we drop the mesh and mix with the world, and how do we do it? And how do we do it and keep our own devotion? And if we mix, can we actually enhance our devotion by the mutual exchange and learning? These are the challenges of practical life, of being a devotee. A lot of this is brilliantly presented in one of my most famous seminars of all time by Rabindra Swarup called The Cure of Souls. You can Google it. It's one of the best seminars on this topic I've ever heard. It's basically not in so many words, Rupa Goswami in the Upadeshamrita says, how do devotees interact with themselves and with the world? And then Rabindra goes on in much more detail in a brilliant presentation. I mean, it's just mind-blowing how smart it is. So that's a nice question. It's tough. I mean, sometimes in Alachua, it's too ingrown. You know, you end up like I was. I'm a geologist. So one time I was exploring for oil in East Kentucky. Now, East Kentucky, where the Hatfields and the McCoys still are fighting to this day. There, for those who don't know, those are two clans that had a big battle over some marriage or failed marriage or something, and they started fighting and shooting each other, and it still goes on. Literally. I asked the sheriff, I said, they still fight? And he goes, of course. And when I went there, there's a lot of, I noticed it was weird because everyone seemed to have an extra finger on their hand. 6 fingers, 4 fingers, or some were short, some had extra. You know, if you had up both hands, you might get 10, but it wasn't 5 on each. And I asked the sheriff, who had 5 on each, so he wouldn't be insulted. I said, what's going on here? Explain it, because I'd stayed there for a while. It's such a strange place. I was out there several weeks doing my work. And he said, oh, they interbreed, you know, first cousin marries first cousin, sometimes brother and sister, who knows what. And he said, all that interbreeding results in some kind of genetic weirdness. And so in a similar way, as devotees, if we say 2 mixed just with each other, we could end up with 6 devotional fingers. And at the same time, if we mix too much, we may not even have our devotional life. So we have to intelligently decide how to balance our life. In that sense, we have to be very Buddhist. Now, sometimes we may have trouble with the Buddhists and, you know, with their Mayavad and all is one and things, how does a Buddha order a pizza? How does that go? He goes into pizza and says, I'd like one with everything. So something like that. So you at the same time, the Buddhists advocate the middle road, not too much, not too little. And they're very good at the middle way, and they're the experts in the world on it. So I learned from the Buddhists about it. And Krishna does the same thing in the Gita. He says, don't eat too much, don't eat too little. Don't sleep too much, don't sleep too little. Krishna also advocates the middle way in many places. In the Gita, it's the most dramatic, but it's often advocated. So as devotees, we have to advocate, we have to do the middle way and then be, as Rabindra presents in his Cure of Souls, very realistically where we're at spiritually. And if we're spiritually at a place, gee, I really don't want to mix with anybody, it just, my mind isn't there, then we have to be honest and be a little more cloistered. Other people will be cloistered because they're bhajanandis. All they really want to do is just chant all day. And we need some people like that. I find no fault in that. Other people, but I remember in the early days, one devotee came and he wore a harmonica rack. And in it, he had a picture of Krishna. So for harmonica instrument, there's a rack to hold it. And then he had that and he put a picture of Krishna. So all day he was looking at the picture of Krishna. And people would ask him, will you clean a pot? Will you help with this? Will you help that? No, I'm just thinking of Krishna. And he lasted a week and then left and never came back. So either extreme doesn't work. We have to be honest, where am I at personally? And if we don't know, then that's sadhu sangha. We approach the people we trust and say, gee, I got these desires and what do I do about it? And how do I associate, and how do I deal with the problems of the world and the problems of the family and still keep my consciousness high. These are the hard practical issues we have to deal with. And if we don't talk about it, we'll never deal with it. They're not easy. Prabhupada used to put it so nicely. He said, Krishna consciousness is simple. It's just not easy. Yeah, so I think of that almost every day. Okay, any other questions? We have 1 minute, 30 seconds left before we all turn into pumpkins. And then Atma made prasadam for everybody, and he's going to fax it to all of you. Hey, soon we'll all be in person again. It won't be that long. I know I got my shot. Every time I go past a 5G tower, I light up. So I know it's working well. I get these pictures of Bill Gates in my head, and I'm trying to get, it used to be Bill and Melinda, but that changed 2 weeks ago. So anyway, anyway, my opinion, I'm a scientist. And I know there's a lot of debate, but I'll state my opinion. Get your shot. It's not new technology. It's been around for 30 years. It's not new. It's just because of the pandemic, the specific formula needed for the coronavirus could be tested in mass. You could never test it in mass without a pandemic. So, I say, unless you have some immunocompromised system, that's between you and your doctor, get a shot. That's my opinion. Now, if you don't want to, and if you have some objections to it, I respect that. But as a scientist, I studied it inside out. Anyway, that's just an aside. That was an unpaid political announcement. Okay. Anything else?
Can I pay you for that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, some GBC men asked the BI, Bhakti Institute, would we put on a panel for and against COVID shots? So I took it to my board of directors. It's a really illustrious board of people like Yogeshwar and like that on there. So I took it to our board 2 weeks ago, and I said, well, what do you think? And the answer was unanimous, hell no. It's just so contentious, and people are so nutty nowadays that it would be so much work, and people already made up their minds. So what good does it do? So anyway, that spared me. We didn't do the panel. I actually tried to find reasonable people on both sides, and the reasonable people on each side refused to speak because they couldn't stand the polemics. It's a very polemical time, as everybody knows. With that said, if there's not any final question or comment, we'll stop here. Since there is only a few of us, I like to do a round robin at the end. You don't have to unmute, and you can even turn off your video and hide if you like. But I would like everyone to give one reflection of something they liked or didn't like or learned or they want to share. Let's go around the room. Who would like to begin? Yes, Atmaji.
I found the things you're saying profound, stimulating in a profound way that got my intellect very involved in the spiritual realm. And so I love that. I also loved thinking about how I should be careful about getting so enmeshed in devotee association that I or my descendants have 6 fingers, on one hand. That was something I'll think about. Probably I'll never forget that. I learned that today in today's class.
Very good. I mean, I'm still shocked from my visit, 30 years ago to East Kentucky for 2 weeks. I'm still like, oh my God. Okay. Anybody else have anything to? Yes, Andrea. Andrea, your smile makes a lot easier for me to give a class. It really helps.
Thank you so much, Brahmatirtha Prabhu. And I hope to have your association in person soon. I know that we have a mutual friend, Leela Devitasi, who has volunteered to try to coordinate that because I'm down here in Gainesville as well.
Yeah. Well, I know you're done. So let's get together for sure. Just coordinate with Leela. I mean,
I will.
Today.
I get to see her on Tuesday, so I'll talk to her then. But one of the things that I really liked, that's my takeaway from this class, because it's very relevant to what's going on with me, is about how devotees' karma is still there, but not as punitive, but educational, and how it's metered and we're not given the full dose. Because I had a very Florida thing happen to me where I was in the park and I was trying to be like, have a good devotional thing. And I was picking up garbage as I was chanting, and I got bit twice by a fire ant. And then I found myself, at the time I was very zen about it. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, ant. And, I chanted to the ant and I took it off, and then I was like, it's fine. And then I continued doing what I was doing. But then the toe now is infected and inflamed, and, it's pretty painful. But the whole time I kept telling to Paul, I was just like, but remember, I must have been doing some kind of devotional service, because it could have been a lot worse. The doctor said that usually fire ants will send out pheromones and they'll get other fire ants to come and bite the same person multiple times. And if I had this reaction for this, then if I had more bites, I could have gone into some kind of shock or whatever. So he was like, so I told Paul, I was just like, oh, it could have been a lot worse. See, so it's Krishna's mercy. Because I was chanting.
It is. And you were trying to pick up garbage.
I was trying to pick up garbage. So Mother Bhumi was looking out for me too. It's just
brings us to one of our mantras: no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it helps me, because right now, it's painful, but I want to keep remembering what you said about how, it's not a punitive thing. If anything, there's an educational part of it. I don't know what it is yet, but I also want to stay in the mood of gratitude that I could have been a lot worse, and Krishna made it a lot less, for whatever his mercy is.
Very good. A nice example. And we'll meet up soon. Who else? Anybody else like to make a comment or reflection? You don't have to, but just see. Anybody else? Okay. Yes, Dixon Prabhu.
Krishna Prabhu. Yeah, thank you for your wonderful class. What I gathered from this was really interesting to me to see that you have a geology background. I also did geology I have a background in geology, worked in it for about 5 years. So I like it when you draw the analogy between going to Vrindavan and not really entering the atmosphere of Vrindavan, and comparing it to going to the moon, but not really entering the moon atmosphere, and how you compare it to the lava boiling in the depth of the ocean. I could relate to it, and I like the way it all came together from my geological perspective. It was really apt.
Very good. Yeah, you work as a geologist?
No, 10 years ago, I was in geology. I worked in gold deposits exploration for 5 years.
Interesting. Well, the nice thing about geology is kind of down to earth, but anyway, okay. So
it was fun.
Okay. Any other comments or questions or anything else? Yes, Bhakti Shasha.
Yeah, I liked when you said that if we are not aware of our thoughts, then they will eat us alive.
Yes, it's called mindfulness. And Krishna consciousness has always emphasized mindfulness. We just didn't call it mindfulness. but being mindful. Prabhupada was extremely mindful. He just noticed everything. And we, of course, have to notice our thoughts and not judge them. Mindful means not judge them. I have thoughts. I had this thought, and it's not a very nice thought, but it doesn't mean I'm not very nice. It just means a thought came that way. It just happens. And then it doesn't control us anymore, these thoughts.
Prabhu, didn't Brahmatirtha Prabhu, doesn't Prabhupada say, or maybe it's just my Bhakti leader back 30 years ago saying, doesn't he say, to be Krishna conscious, you need to be conscious?
No, very, very much so. You have to be conscious. No, it's a good way to put it. You have to, if you're unconscious, you're not going to be Krishna conscious. You're going to be sleeping and not dreaming of Krishna either. Okay, any other comments? Anybody else want to say anything? Okay, with that, we'll stop here. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful class. Andrea, I'll see you soon. And Atma, unfortunately, Miss Rathi Yatra, I can't quite, a little too soon for me to make it to New York, but
Okay.
I will be up there in August, so maybe we'll see each other, I would hope.
That would be wonderful. That would be
I don't
wonderful.
have a date yet, but I plan to. Just want to make sure there's not another wave of some kind of weird COVID stuff going on.
Yeah, would you please, if you come to New York, if we're not, at a minimum, if we're not getting together with at a program, would you let me know that you're in New York, and maybe I could have the good fortune to get your association?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, we could have dinner at Divya's or whatever. And I always like that. That's a pleasure for me.
That would be wonderful.
And those of you from India, I think Aravind and Gaurav, you're from India, I am assuming. I hope things are well with you and your families. I know there's hardly anyone in India isn't suffering terribly now. Terribly.
Yeah, they've been better. I was in India until last week. So yeah, I saw that.
Well, everyone should wipe off their screen now. Okay, now I'm just teasing. No, but India is just, I have a friend just coming back from India in 2 days, American guy. He's been trying to leave India for 4 months.
Oh, wow.
And he just couldn't get out. And of course, he was in Vrindavan, so not all bad. But in India, so everybody, I don't know anyone. I know many Indians, of course, and every Indian I know has family members who are either dying or sick from COVID. I don't know any exception, so it's rough. Hope you're doing okay there, Arvind.
Yeah, I'm doing fine. I had in my family, like my sister, her husband, they had COVID last November. In my extended family, a lot of people, they got COVID, some died, a lot of people, very sad, some young people, and what to do, it's like, luckily no one in immediate family, but in my immediate family also a lot of people got sick, and even in rural areas, like deep villages, no one thought, last time there was no COVID in villages. This time there was it was pretty bad. And
they had that big Kumbh Mela, and then they had all the political rallies, and then the farmers' strike, and all three of those were super spreaders.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I looked at the data, it actually spread before Kumbh and, the rallies. I think it was, what I believe is, a lot of people from Punjab, they brought it from UK and, Mumbai. So it may be also seasonal, because honestly, they were never social distancing. Thing is, no one was ever wearing masks. So I think this third wave is, they were not social. Even when I went there at the height of the pandemic, people in the market, no one was wearing masks, and they were smoking.
Oh my.
Yeah. So
you cannot, we might think, we're devotees, but the law of nature applies. Prabhupada said, you don't walk through the jungle. Lord Chaitanya could walk through the jungle and the tigers would chant, but he was God. For us, we don't go through the jungle. Just walk through the jungle. We can't be foolish. Okay, it's good to see you all. Atma and Shasha, thanks for organizing all of this. Hare Krishna.
Okay, and before you go, I just like to say one last short thing. I want to offer I wish that all the devotees offer well wishes to anyone who we know who is having any suffering from the COVID.
Very good.
And I also, there's, and wishing well, maybe we can take a minute after the program, like tonight or whatever, in honor of Pankajangri Prabhu, Bhuvaneshwar Prabhu, who he didn't die from COVID, but he left his body this week. And then Bhakta Sasha Prabhu, his stepfather, not from COVID. And then also nothing related to this, but I wish well for your wife Brahmatirtha Prabhu. I know that she had an important surgery, and I wish the very best for her. She's such a wonderful devotee, and for you and all of your loved ones.
Thanks. Fortunately, she's doing very well now, but I appreciate that a lot. Very good. The good wishes of all of her well-wishers that even her doctor said, those people who have all these good wishes, they recover so much better.
Really?
Yeah. Even the doctor said it makes such a difference. It does. Okay. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, everyone. See you next week.